The Ohio Chamber of Commerce proudly brings you another episode of Down to Business, a podcast that elevates the voices of business, community, and thought leaders, aiming to empower you and your business. That's why we're here, to aggressively champion free enterprise, economic competitiveness, and growth for the benefit of all Ohioans. Now, without further ado, it's time to get down to business.
Welcome to Down to Business, the podcast where we dive deep into the heart of Ohio's business landscape. I'm Rick Carfagna, Senior Vice President for Government Affairs at the Ohio Chamber of Commerce, and I'll be your guide through the stories, strategies, and successes that shape our state's vibrant economy. Whether you're an entrepreneur, business leader, or someone curious about the dynamic world of Ohio's business, you're in the right place. High-speed internet is the great social equalizer of our time. It brings together economic, cultural, educational, and social resources across the globe to our communities. So many in the Buckeye State, however, continue to be deprived of access to these opportunities. Of the 11.8 million Ohioans in our state, nearly 1 million still lack residential access to reliable, high-speed internet, with hundreds of thousands of households having no options whatsoever. That's not to say help isn't coming. Since taking office in 2019, the DeWine-Husted administration has made broadband expansion to unserved and underserved areas of the state a key priority, investing hundreds of millions of dollars and removing regulatory hurdles to facilitate expansion. Additionally, private broadband providers across the state have continued making significant private investments to bring high-speed internet to those who are lacking. Here to shed some light on the state of broadband expansion in the state of Ohio are experts from both the public and private sectors who are all contributing in their own ways to help bridge the digital divide. Peter Voderberg is the chief of BroadbandOhio, an office housed within the Ohio Department of Development that is dedicated to improving access to high-speed internet across Ohio. Peter, welcome to Down to Business.
Thanks for having me.
We're also privileged today to have with us three of the legacy broadband providers in Ohio to share their perspectives on what they're doing to increase accessibility to the internet and shed some light on the barriers that still remain. Molly Kocour Boyle is the president of AT&T Ohio. They've invested nearly $1.8 billion in its Ohio networks from 2020 to 2022. They employ 3,000 workers throughout our state. Molly, it's an honor to have you join us today.
Thanks for having me.
Chuck Duncan is the Vice President of Government and Regulatory Affairs at Comcast, which does business as Xfinity and is the largest internet provider in the United States. Chuck? Doesn't matter. We'll go with Chuck. Chuck made the trip today from Pennsylvania to Columbus to participate in our discussion. We really appreciate having you with us.
Thank you for having me.
And finally, we are joined by Ted Heckman, who is the Senior Director of Regulatory and Government Affairs for Alta Fiber. That is formerly the telecommunications company known as Cincinnati Bell, which is based out of, you guessed it, Cincinnati, yet has a reach far beyond Southwest Ohio. Ted, thanks for making the trek north today to join us.
Thanks for the invitation.
So, Peter, we've got lots to get to today, but I want to first start with you, Peter Voderberg. Governor DeWine, back in December of 2019, announced the state's first ever Ohio broadband strategy. Can you quickly recap for us, what does that document entail? What are the duties and projects that your office has been tasked with?
Sure. So the administration has really taken a hardline stance on making sure that we have, reliable, high-speed, affordable internet to every Ohioan, regardless of where they happen to live. And that kind of started out because at the beginning of the administration, we had some providers come to us and ask for right-of-way access to our limited access Blue Shield interstate highways. And in trying to work with them, we actually had a conversation about what we could use those highways for. Like, could we use them to gain additional connectivity to unserved areas? Could we use them for economic development? And in the back and forth with some of the companies we were talking to, the ones that we were talking to at the time really weren't super interested in helping out. And so we created a broadband study committee. We put out an RFI, had a whole bunch of people. Some of the people around the table responded to that RFI. And the number one thing that they said was, you don't have a broadband strategy. We were losing out on points for a grant program called Reconnect through the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And so the administration very quickly said, well, that's not good. We need a strategy. So we put together the state's first broadband strategy, and we have recently updated the pillars of that strategy through the BEAD program. When we were doing our listening sessions and talking to folks, we made a realization that we needed to update some of those things, because one of the original strategies was to have a statewide grant program, which you can attest to that we actually have now. So we checked that kind of off the list, but I will give you what the main pillars of the strategy are. The first is to bring reliable, affordable, high-speed internet to every Ohioan in their homes and in their communities. So that means that we want to make sure that no matter where you live, you have access to the federal definition of high-speed internet access, which is 100 megabits per second download speed and 20 megabits per second upload speed, which is now the official FCC definition of high-speed internet for the state of Ohio and for the country. So we're really excited about that. So we want to make sure that not only can you get it in your house, but that you actually have a community anchor institution. Our vision is that you have a community anchor institution within 5 miles of your location where you can go and get internet, free public Wi-Fi internet. The second is to promote the creation of world-class broadband networks throughout the state via the use of best-in-class technologies. That actually used to say build. We took the word build out and switched to promote for two reasons. One, because I'm not going to build it. You would not want to be on an internet network that Peter Voderberg built. That is not what I do. So we promote it. We have fantastic relationships with most of the internet service providers in the state. I know, definitely fantastic relationships with the internet service providers around the table. And we have done everything we can to make our grant program, our regulatory policies, and everything else as streamlined as possible to make it as easy as possible to get out to the state of Ohio. I think the testament to that is that currently we're in a round of our residential broadband expansion grant program where we have $77 million and we have over $780 million worth of asks. So clearly the program is being used by our internet service providers. And in our first residential broadband expansion grant program, we had $250 million and we had over $1 billion worth of asks. So we've done everything we can to make it a very competitive environment in the state of Ohio. The next is to enable participation in the modern economy. You'll hear the lieutenant governor and the governor say that you cannot participate in the modern economy if you don't actually have internet access. And the reason we say that is because most people have to apply for jobs online, right? Most people have to or do shopping online. They do telehealth. They do all of these different things to make sure that they can communicate with the outside world and with loved ones. And so without the internet, you can't do those things. And so that's the third pillar. And the last is to empower Ohioans through training, device access, and digital skills. And so what that means is we want to make sure that everybody has a device available to them, either in a public space through one of our community anchor institutions or in their homes, and that they know how to use it, because we don't want your first interaction being online is that someone scams you or asks you for money or does something like that. So we want you to be protected. And all those things put together, really the purview of the office is we're a one-stop shop for broadband, right? So we run a very successful grant program that we have worked very hard to build, that you actually helped us build while you were in the legislature. We were very happy to be a part of that program and that process. It's been extremely successful and extremely valuable to Ohioans. And I think really we've done everything from working on middle mile infrastructure grant requests to the federal government. We're the place that you can go if you're a community. We have what's called the Community Accelerator Program so that communities can be ready for broadband. We're working on making sure that all of the municipalities and townships understand the regulatory issues that they're doing that stand in the way of broadband expansion. We're having conversations with pole owners to make sure that we actually can do make ready, because that's one of the choke points that we're seeing right now in which I'm sure we'll get to a little later, but we will be, yes. But we're trying to make sure that we have the workforce ready to be able to build this, because again, we have $800 million coming basically to the state of Ohio to finalize universal coverage, and we need to pull out all the stops to make sure it's successful, because we want to be able to say to every Ohioan that by 2030 that they're going to have internet access in their homes if they want it.
Wow. Well, you've really set the table for today's discussion. Thanks, Peter.
Sure.
Now, I'd like to shift gears and hear from the providers themselves. So maybe just going around the table, can each of you share a little bit about your presence in Ohio? What areas of the state do you serve? What sort of residential speeds do you offer? How many Ohioans roughly do you employ? And do you have any sort of build out or upgrade projects as of late? What do those look like? Ted, let's start with you.
Yeah. Well, Rick, I wanted to just start off by saying thank you for your time in the General Assembly. As Peter mentioned, you were the champion and have gotten us as far along as we have. And without that, it wouldn't probably be, we still would be having a lot more
I don't have any questions that refer to my time doing it, but I appreciate you drawing that out.
Yeah,
Thank you.
But
We're all going to keep talking about it anyway. That's the way that it's
Very well.
Alta Fiber is the leading provider of fiber-based services in the greater Cincinnati area, backed by 150 years of communications experience. Our network spans more than 16,600 route miles in greater Cincinnati, where we're the company that offers fiber-based services to nearly 100% of business and single-family addresses. Alta Fiber is also the only service provider to offer 2 gig speeds in the greater Cincinnati market. We employ roughly 1,500 employees in the greater Cincinnati area, and kind of our expansion plans is we're looking to expand our multi-gigabit network service to approximately 400,000 homes outside of our incumbent territory, including new markets in Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana. In fact, right now we're in the process of expanding our markets to the greater Dayton area, Columbus, and just last week we began construction in the city of Dublin here in the Columbus area.
Wow. Pretty broad reach. Molly, let's go with you next. AT&T Ohio. Tell us a little bit about the small company of yours.
Yeah, so it's just a mom and pop shop. We are so proud. We've been doing business in the state of Ohio for more than 145 years. So that legacy of connectivity, of unlocking greater possibilities for the communities we serve, that's been part of our history and it's part of our future. We've got more than 800,000 residential locations that have access to our fiber, and that's in 130 Ohio communities. And that's, suspects like Columbus and Cleveland and Toledo and Dayton, but also really small communities that range from, Lancaster and Niles and Miamisburg and Northwood. We are really excited about the opportunities that Peter highlighted and are looking forward to the future. I think, connectivity to fiber and all that unlocks, we know what a gift that is. And so to be hopefully part of that story, to make sure that every Ohioan has access to fiber, whether it be from our company or one of the other ones around the table, is just a great opportunity. So we're looking forward to what's next.
Thank you. And Chuck Duncan, Comcast, National Reach. Tell us a little bit about what's going on in Ohio.
Yes, but I do want to know we are truly a small mom and pop cable and internet provider who started in Mississippi with one community cable back in the 60s. But currently we serve Belmont, Jefferson, Columbiana, Mahoning, and Harrison counties in Ohio. And our customers have access to 1.2 gigs or more of speed. We currently employ 390 employees in Ohio, and we have several expansion projects lined up, particularly in Mahoning, Belmont, and Jefferson County. But we are looking to expand in Ohio, and we look forward to working with everyone in Ohio to achieve that.
Yeah, and Eastern Ohio is really those areas that have those broadband deserts out there, so I know that that's especially meaningful. So the pandemic really laid bare the access disparities in Ohio. You alluded to this, Peter. It was almost overnight for families. Now you're trying to work from home, participate in virtual learning, avail yourself of telehealth resources, and it's impossible if you don't have a high-speed internet connection. So, Peter, from a policy-making perspective, how did COVID-19 change the narrative and accelerate government action on broadband in Ohio?
Sure. So it changed everything. I can say that, when BroadbandOhio first started in March of 2020, so like 2 weeks before the pandemic, kind of hit, I actually started on March 3rd. We were having a conversation, and I can't not call you representative. I'm sorry. I'm so used to it. I keep trying to say Rick, I can't. So, so we.
Full disclosure, I served as a state representative. for 3 terms, so we get that out of the way.
Yeah, so I can't help it. I'm sorry. So we, the administration had shown how important broadband was, because I remember prior to the pandemic, we had been working with you as a representative, and we had walked into an IP meeting and had said, like, look, we know that as of right now, there's only $2 million in this bill, and we came in and said now there's 20, and that changed the conversation, because for the first time, I think the internet service providers were like, oh, that's a substantial amount of money, which is funny to think of now because of how much money is just coming in for broadband, but $20 million was a game changer. The internet service providers really took us seriously. So to be clear, like, we really were talking about this beforehand, and so going into the pandemic, right, we very much were interested in doing what we could with some of the states that have come before us, like Minnesota, who had a long-standing grant program, and we were really excited to do that. And then when the pandemic hit, overnight we had communities that were sending kids home that said, yeah, because we'll do learning from home, and then they figured out that 60% of their students didn't have internet connections, right, or greater, or if they did have internet connections, they didn't have devices, and so we were scrambling to do anything we could to get connectivity out to people. So we did everything from we created a list of all of the public Wi-Fi areas for the state of Ohio that we could come up with, and we worked with many of the providers, many of which are around the table, to have them tell us where you could go and actually get public Wi-Fi. Funny story. So when we first put that list out, because I only had 24 hours to make it, to get it out, I got a call from Michelle Francis, who's in charge of the Ohio Library Council. She was like, hey, I looked at your list. Why aren't libraries on there? And my response was, why aren't libraries on there? That's my bad. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And so we frantically added all the libraries to that list to make sure that people knew the public places, because again, we were going so fast trying to just get information out that we did everything we could to get people to where they could get online to do telehealth or schoolwork or commute, telecommute, and it really changed everything. I think it put to the forefront that it isn't just Netflix, and Xbox and entertainment that we're using the internet for, right? That we're using it to really help with our daily lives, right? I frequently ask people, I'm like, what would I, when I speak, I ask people, like, how does it feel when your internet goes out for an hour? And everyone says, like, oh my gosh. I'm like, yeah, what if you never had it? Like, if all of you around this table or all of you in this area are like, oh my gosh, it would be awful if I lost it for an hour. Think about what it's like for those people who just can't access it at all, right? So that all came to the forefront. It really changed the narrative. It allowed us to make sure that we had additional resources that we could put. It went from $20 million to $250/$270 million for broadband expansion in the state. It put us on the forefront of workforce for internet and broadband splicers and everything else. So it changed how we were really looking at internet connectivity and how important it became. And it's allowed us to have the mission that we have at Broadband Ohio, to work with our internet service providers, to work with our nonprofits and our local communities to make sure that everyone has access because of how important it is. And I always say, like, we take it from a very positive perspective, right? So, like, for instance, when the initial emergency broadband benefit came out, right, many providers jumped on right away, but not everyone did. So we had a long conversation about, like, well, how should we, highlight this? And the decision was made to make it positive, right? And to have a list of, like, here's everyone who has accepted the emergency broadband benefit, which allowed people to get a discount on their internet. And the great thing about doing that is the lieutenant governor every day was just tweeting out a list of, like, hey, here's everybody today who took the EBB. And I can tell you that the amount of providers that then called me and was like, hey, I'm taking it too. Like, I'll go ahead and take it. Like, if he'll tweet my name, like, we'll get on this too. And so we do it that way. We try to stay positive and try to encourage, additional outreach and expansion through partnerships, through positive impact. Because again, like I said before, like, I'm not going to build this network. All of the people around this table are going to help build this network, and as a result of that, we want to do what we can to work with you to get the connectivity out to Ohioans the way they need it.
Yeah. Well, and COVID really took away a lot of people's coping mechanisms for not having broadband.
Oh, so, yeah.
If you're a student, a high school student, and you don't have the internet at your house, you're going to McDonald's to use their free Wi-Fi. You're going to the library after school to use their computer lab. Well, what happens when McDonald's is now closed?
Right.
What happens when you have to sit now in the parking lot at the library and you can't go inside the library? And I want to shift and hear from the providers, because the pandemic was obviously devastating to families and businesses throughout Ohio. Overnight, now you are providing a lifeline service for literally everything to Ohio families. But you also have the challenges of keeping your own companies up and running. You have employees that are sick or, having problems of their own. Just go around the table and talk about, what it was like during that time. Molly, can we start with you?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're most proud to say is the internet didn't break. When you think about where all of the hubs of commerce and learning and sort of daily social activities and how they were concentrated and how the network had been built to support those activities and how it shifted overnight to be in the suburbs, at people's homes, all, trying to keep everything operational. The fact that that pivot was able to be made, and again, people were, if they had the connectivity, they were able to use it, I think was an amazing testament to the resilience and the investment that infrastructure providers have done for decades. Now, that being said, again, it brought to light many of the challenges that Peter highlighted, that we talked about, the fact that if you did not have that access at home, how that even exacerbated the digital divide that we knew that existed. And so for AT&T, first speaking on behalf of just the way we ran our operations, we were essential workforce. I mean, it was something that was needed to make sure that healthcare companies were still operational, that logistics companies that were delivering pandemic supplies were operational. And so had to work really closely with our employees and, all of our experts to make sure that social distancing was in place. We pivoted our retail models to be drive-through style, really having to get creative and innovative about how we could still serve and keep people connected, but do it in a way that put the health and safety of our workforce first. In terms of the connectivity piece for businesses, I mean, we saw cybersecurity breach attempts increase 50% in 2020 and 2021.
50%?
50%.
50%.
And then for healthcare companies, 25% spike in successful breaches. So you think about not just the connectivity, but all of the defense that goes into making sure that, again, when you've pivoted from your, secure office locations where there's firewalls and there's all the protections to, dialing up on your home internet and making sure that, again, whatever data that you were using and accessing to make that company operational still work, that it's got all of the treatment and security features that are needed. That was obviously a big learning and an opportunity, and I think it'll inform, obviously, how businesses and companies move forward, too, as folks have now adopted more of a hybrid style of working. And then just close with the digital divide piece. Again, we had always been focused on making efforts to focus on education from a philanthropic standpoint, but really with the key learnings from the pandemic, narrowed that focus into the digital divide and the homework gap. And so with the homework gap, knowing that students, were sitting in parking lots and, getting Wi-Fi from a bus that had it enabled, we have made a $5 billion commitment to focus resources and attention on helping close that digital divide gap, but even more specifically that homework gap, and opened connected learning centers, 2 in Cleveland, 1 on the east side, 1 on the west side, and I'm pleased to say we're opening our first in Columbus at the Boys and Girls Club at J. Ashburn Center. So again, providing another place for families and students to have connectivity so they can unlock those digital resources.
Great. And Chuck, what was Comcast? Give us a testimonial of what it was like for Comcast during that period.
So we were no different than any other company during that period of time. We transitioned 95% of our customer service employees, which are tens of thousands, to work from home, including call center agents. And we were able to do that because of investment in smart software and automation tools that allowed our network engineers and other Comcast technologists to smoothly transition all their critical work home. But while that was occurring, our technicians and our technical teams remained out in the field building fiber during the pandemic. So we did not stop working during that critical period of time. And one of the amazing things, it allowed us to interact and interface with our customers in the way that we were transitioning to. It just accelerated it. During that period of time, the Xfinity Assistant program, we saw a 445% increase in its usage, which allows a customer to be mailed a modem or a box or whatever they need from us, and to communicate with us either through a chatbot, over the phone, using their smartphone to install so that they can safely use our products. And lastly, during that period of time, we were essential in helping small businesses through our Comcast Business Division to get through and weather the pandemic.
Thank you. And Ted, Alta Fiber, what was the story with you guys?
Well, on Friday the 13th of March, we announced our merger, being bought and going private with Macquarie Asset Management. And then on Monday the 16th, we were all working from home and
Wow.
Beginning the work on trying to get that merger to be approved with regulators. But no, I think, a lot of the comments that the others have made is our field operations personnel were, they were truly our unsung heroes. While the rest of us were going home, to work from home, they were going into customer premises and to install, repair, and maintain connectivity. I think, their safety and well-being was paramount. So, they had the appropriate masks, gloves, hand sanitation, and everything to make sure that, they were safe. I think one of the unique things that we did, we partnered with a number of community organizations to come up with what we called Connected Students. It was a program where thousands of students were able to get connected to the network at low or no cost for a 12-month period. So, as that, they were all going home for school and whatever, a number of the school systems that we partnered with were able to, provide connectivity to their students to be able to do that. I think some of the other things that we were, as students were going home, a lot of students in a number of our school systems depend on the schools for lunches. Well, we made, approximately $100,000 worth of contributions to the school lunch program so that they could get those lunches out to the students still that needed that. The other things, as Peter mentioned, we turned up public Wi-Fi, hotspots throughout our communities where we had them. And then as part of the FCC's Keep American Connected program, we pledged not to disconnect customers, and we waived late payment charges during that time period. So, I think, we as a company, but I think we as an industry went well and above, and we saw, some of the greatest accomplishments that we could under such, dire straits in that.
I think that the fact that your three companies were able to be so nimble and frankly forgiving of customers during that period, it's certainly to be commended. Peter, you've talked already a little bit about the Ohio Residential Broadband Expansion Program. As you've alluded to, that was House Bill 2. That was legislation I crafted. It was signed back into law in May of 21. Initial funding, as you said, was $20 million. It got plussed up another $250 million in the state budget. Talk us through real quick the funding of the program since that time. We've had another couple budget cycles since then. How much has been doled out in construction grants? I mean, is the state seeing a return on investment from these grants?
Sure, yeah. So I can say that first round of the Residential Broadband Expansion Grant Program, we were able to award $232 million to providers. We would have awarded more, but the next winner in the round was going to ask for more money than we had. So that's why we started with $232 million. Between the actual directly funded commitments for the grant program and then all of the 2-year commitments, because part of the grant program allowed people to challenge applications and say, please don't fund those addresses because we will build them within the next 2 years. Between the two of those kinds of commitments, we had about 100,000 addresses, just shy of that. That were otherwise awarded. So since that time, we have seen to date over 13,000 addresses have already been built from all of those commitments. The build cycles, we are seeing lots more come on every single day. So we're seeing lots more companies. We believe that by the end of the summer, we'll have many more to talk about because most of our grantees are just finishing up and actually doing the turning on of a lot of our the areas that they were awarded. We've seen a couple of delays. We have some make-ready delays that we'll talk about, but for the most part, most of the grants are on track to being finalized. And like I said, by the end of this year, we're hoping to see a lot of the 100,000 addresses actually fixed. I can say prior to the FCC's new map, which allows us to see them on an address level specific data viewpoint, so you can actually go to the FCC map and actually see each individual address and whether it has or does not have connectivity. We are finding that some of the awarded locations that we're talking about, because we didn't have that kind of address arrest level specific data before, that there's a little bit of, truing up that we're doing from the first round of the residential broadband expansion grant program. But for the most part, we're very happy and with the success that our companies are having with the program. And since that time, we have had another $77 million get put into the program through the Coronavirus Capital Projects Fund. And then we're using that program as the basis for the grant program that will be what's called the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. The federal government, it's about $800 million. We're using as much of House Bill 2 as possible to be the underlying grant program that we're going to be using for the BEAD program dollars. So it's very exciting. We're actually we just finished our challenge process for that second round, which means that we're very much hoping to have the awards for that money here in the next month or so, hopefully in June, really. And then we will be starting the BEAD program as fast as we can once we actually finish working with the NTIA, the National Telecommunications Information Administration, to get all of the details squared away. So it's a lot of money, or it sounds like a lot of money, but you've also heard from many of these companies how their investments are in the billions of dollars over the last few years. So it is a good amount of money for a subsidy, but we're going to do everything we can to stretch those dollars as far as we can to reach as many Ohioans as possible, because again, the goal by the end of the BEAD program is that we will all be able to stand together and say that the state of Ohio has universal coverage and that every house has the ability to get high-speed internet access.
It's transformative. I mean, it's an expensive problem, but these are transformative dollars, and you're getting this type of infrastructure out throughout the state, not unlike rural electric back in the 1930s.
That's right.
So to the providers, I mean, Peter's talked about the state program in place. I mean, there are assorted federal programs out there. The FCC has their Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. There's the Reconnect program. There's the BEAD program now. What's your experience been? I mean, have you guys been able to avail yourselves of any of these state or federal dollars? Have they been useful? Can any of you comment on using maybe any of these here in Ohio? Jump ball, whoever wants to take it first.
Yeah, at Alta Fiber, we have taken advantage of these programs. I mean, there are doors that, do not make economic sense to build to. And these programs have allowed for that gap to fill what is economic from our investment standpoint, add the additional subsidy to that to allow for the building to happen. And we've been taking advantage of the Connect America funds that were available. We took $14 million between Ohio and Kentucky. $1.5 million of it went to Ohio. We've participated in RDOF for the tune of $2.6 million. Ohio only received $500,000, but Kentucky has a much higher cost, and Ohio is doing a much better job of getting doors passed. And we took advantage of the state and local government funds from the American Rescue Plan to the tune of $53 million, $25 million of it in the state of Ohio alone. So, we've been able to utilize that to, number one, nearly get to 100%, as I mentioned earlier, fiber doors passed in our greater Cincinnati market, and to expand to areas now outside of that footprint. And we did apply in ORBEG 1 is the acronym for the Ohio Residential Program,
Sure.
But did not win. The dollars did go to those areas that probably required it more than ours. And we have participated in round 2 and are waiting to see if we have any winners there.
Well, great. Well, and as Peter said, I mean, there's going to be plenty of opportunities, I think, for future rounds as well. AT&T, Comcast?
We have participated across the country. We have seen a lot of opportunity. We have participated in Orbit 1. We have received $9.4 million for a $15 million project, and that allows right under 2,500 passings. But again, we've been aggressively going after public dollars, whether it's through ARPA, whether it's CPF, whether it's Orbit, no matter what it is. Like for example, just last week in Pennsylvania, we were awarded $70 million. For CPF. And yes, that's $70 million, but also understand that we are ourselves investing 40 to 50% as well. Because a lot of these communities, as was noted, it doesn't make financial sense for us to build our network there. And this is allowing us to edge out and go into communities that we otherwise would not have gone into. But But on the flip side of that, I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but what we're running into is trying to explain to government how businesses operate. In some states, we are getting hit with prevailing wage when we don't believe prevailing wage applies. And then at the national level, we're battling rate regulation through BEAD. We're trying to do good, and we're being asked to create jobs, but then we're being told to do it with our hand behind our back, which is not the intent, we believe, of the program. The program is to connect folks. I like to say, even though I get yelled at by NTIA, this is not a jobs program. This is about building broadband.
Sure.
But then they hit me, slap me on the wrist, and say, no, this is also a jobs program. But those are the things we're seeing, but we are aggressively participating across the country trying to build internet for all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's what's important, right? I mean, you've got all these different government programs. There are all of these different hoops that providers need to jump through. You don't want to make it prohibitive for any of them to participate, but it's good to speak up. Like if you're participating in a limited fashion, or if it's prohibitive, why is it the case? And then they can go back and hopefully fine tune those certain things. Molly, what's been AT&T's experience?
Yeah, we've participated across the country with both the federal opportunities and the state and local opportunities. And I think what's exciting is, not to say those were drops in the bucket, but knowing that what BEAD is going to enable in Ohio, but also across all of the states, is that's the biggest, I think, chunk of funds that is really hopefully going to bring about that goal of universal connectivity to every home. And so, we've made such strides so far, but I can't wait to be here in, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years and talk about, where we are after all of this funds have been distributed and deployed.
I'd like to pivot a little bit. We've been talking about availability of broadband up until this point. But when it comes to barriers for people to be able to get high-speed internet, one is an availability problem, but it's also an affordability problem. In 2021, Congress created what's known as the Affordable Connectivity Program. They appropriated $14.2 billion. It's helped more than 23 million households nationwide get online and stay online, including seniors, veterans, school-aged children, other vulnerable populations. Right here in Ohio, we have over 1.1 million people receiving federally subsidized broadband service through the ACP. But at the end of the month, Congress has yet to reauthorize that program. So at the end of the month, it's very possible that internet bills of those 1.1 million Ohioans could go up by around $30 a month. Our own Senator J.D. Vance has proposed legislation to extend the program, the ACP program, by $7 billion, and he's got bipartisan support for this. Can any or all of you comment on, are your companies using the ACP program in Ohio? What do you think the future holds for the program and those served by it? Whoever wants to begin. Molly?
Yeah, happy to take it. As Peter mentioned, it started with the emergency broadband benefit, the EBB, because all of this investment that takes place, there's not an ROI on it if people aren't able to adopt it. And so I think identifying that key need of not just the access, but the support for adoption, and then also the digital literacy skills that are needed to unlock everything that adoption allows is really important. Congress's, provision of the ACP program, I think, was an important recognition that, again, we want to make sure that not only are we spending these funds to get it out there, but then people can actually take advantage of it. It's really unfortunate that, I think Congress thought they bought themselves enough time for us to figure out a more long-term solution, and yet here we are as it's about to run out with still, no sort of permanent solution in sight. I think the bipartisan legislation that Senator Vance is a part of is a great start, and that conversation is long overdue. It's just unfortunate that we haven't been able to reach the conclusion before the end of those benefits. We have proudly participated in the ACP program and the EBB program. We will still offer our low-income offering, which is our access program from AT&T, and that will be available. And keep calling on Congress and others to make sure that that conversation about a long-term sustainable solution continues, and hopefully with some urgency. But I don't know that there's anything to say right now beyond just we really hope they get to work and get it done.
Ted, talk about Altafiber's experience with the ACP.
Yeah, Altafiber, like Molly mentioned, we participated in EBB. We were also part of, I think, a group of 20. Both my peers here participated and committed to a $30 offering at the White House, all in. So, as our ACP customers that are getting a $30 all-in, and with the $30 discount that they were getting, they were in essence getting it for free. I personally have been on the Hill over the past year, probably 4 times, advocating as a part of U.S. Telecom, ACA Connects, and the Fiber Broadband Association, trying to get Congress to act. I mean, it was, when Senator Vance came out, the first Republican kind of to endorse, the $7 billion, but it was a stopgap because there is still a need for universal service reform, because this is somewhat duplicative. And, one of the big things we've heard from the offices is the, potential for waste, fraud, and abuse, and because of the multiple programs. So, this was to be the stopgap, and it looks like it is going to go away. But, there is a congressional USF reform group that is working together right now. Hopefully they will be coming out with kind of their plan of what the new universal service program could look like and what the funding can be, because the current funding for that is unsustainable. It's based on voice customers' backs only, but yet it shouldn't just be on our companies for broadband, but there are the edge providers, a lot of companies that are making a lot of money off using the internet. They should be participants in helping to fund the affordability for using the internet in the future.
Yeah. Chuck Duncan, Comcast certainly as the largest provider in the United States, your perspective is going to be the most significant. Talk a little bit about Comcast's role with the ACP.
Yes, so we have and up to date have participated in ACP, but it is not looking good. But I do want to make a small footnote that I think some have overlooked is ACP is built into BEAD, right? The assumption of that $30 was built into BEAD. But Comcast, we will offer, and we have offered Internet Essentials, with more than 10 million people have enrolled in our low-income broadband program, and it's the largest and most successful program in the country. Internet Essentials is basically $9.95 a month, right, for our customers, and you can double your speed by going up to $29.95 a month. And just last week, and understand how I talk about our products is our Xfinity product is the Rolls Royce, right? That is the top of the line quality you get. Internet Essentials is an entry point. And just last week, we announced Now, which is for the middle of the market, and it has price points at $20, $30, and $45. So our product offering is available for anyone, but for those that will be rolling off of ACP, we are actively engaging them to enroll in Internet Essentials.
And I'm really glad that you brought that up, and it's a great segue to my next question, because when we were debating over House Bill 2, everybody wanted to solve all these problems at once. And, as I tried to point out, legacy providers do provide deeply discounted services for low-income customers. You've already talked about the Internet Essentials. Could AT&T and Ultra Fiber, could you talk a little bit about some of the low-income programs that you have in place? These things don't get talked about enough, but it's really important because you are bringing connectivity, at a good speed to people that otherwise would be deprived. Whoever wants to talk first.
Thanks, Rick. Our Access from AT&T product offers eligible households, so this is our fiber product, 100 megabytes per second. We're available for $30 a month. And then we have been offering a version of our Access program since 2016. And so, we're proud that existed pre-pandemic, pre-EBB, and something that will exist post-ACP. But again, hoping that there is a more long-term solution, because I think that's really what's going to deliver the benefits. It's great that we all offer it of our own volition, but when you took that ACP benefit and applied it to our Access program, it was free. It was $0, and $0 is something that a lot of families were able to take advantage of. I will say too, we also offer low-cost wireless plans through Cricket Wireless and AT&T Prepaid as well too. We know that, again, when you're income challenged, sometimes you have to make that choice between a wired connection at your home or wireless connectivity. And so glad to offer that as well too, so our folks and families can stay connected.
Multiple options, multiple mediums. Sounds great. Ted?
Yeah, at Ultra Fiber, we have indicated that we will continue the $30 offer, 100 by 20, for those customers that are currently on ACP, and we're evaluating right now what the plan will be for new customers. The ACP had some qualifications. I think that some of them were problematic, and we're trying to look to simplify what the qualification would be for new customers to do that. I think there are a couple other things that we have done in public-private partnerships in working with, and as examples, the Dayton, Kentucky Housing Authority, the Cincinnati Metropolitan Housing Authority, and the Dayton, Ohio Housing Authority, of bringing public Wi-Fi into their communities or the buildings that generally, these are in low-income areas and did not have options, but we were able to bring in public Wi-Fi that allowed for students and residents to participate in the e-economy. I think one of them that we're very proud of is the Mount Healthy Project. It was a collaboration between the state of Ohio, Hamilton County, Mount Healthy City Schools, Alta Fiber, and the city of Mount Healthy, where we partnered together to bring high-speed internet into the downtown district and into several complexes that brought broadband to 825 apartment units for free to those folks in that thing. And we also did another project in Rochester Hills, where we came in at the last minute to help out BroadbandOhio, where they had committed to do a project of bringing broadband to a trailer park. And we were able to bring fiber to that, and worked with the state of Ohio, the Monroe School System, and Butler Tech and that. So those are just a few examples of how we have been trying to close the digital divide.
So here at the Ohio Chamber of Commerce, the most pervasive challenge that we hear across our membership, across all industries, is workforce. It's the ability to find and keep good help. For all of you, access to construction capital, that's one thing. But you have to have the staffing to go with it. So whether it's technicians, whether it's customer service representatives, what are you all experiencing related to workforce? And what are your companies or the state of Ohio, because I know there's an initiative out there that Peter can chomping at the bit to talk about, I'm sure. What are you guys doing to recruit, hire, and train employees in all of these fields? Peter, do you want to go first?
Sure.
Talk a little bit about what's been proposed?
Sure. So at the beginning, when BroadbandOhio was first created, we were a one-man shop. It was just me, and we were doing everything we could to create partnerships to make sure that we could follow the mission of making sure that everyone had broadband access. And one of the things that had happened originally was that Innovate Ohio and BroadbandOhio were working hand in hand. We're actually one of the few states where I can say that we have a very aggressive and very well put together working group internally, where state agencies work together to make sure that we're getting things done and getting out of the way regulatory-wise for our providers to try to make it as easy as possible to expand. And Innovate Ohio was like, well, what can we do to help? And I said, well, we're going to have some money coming in, so why don't we sit down and do a workforce strategy? And so Innovate Ohio did a very comprehensive workforce strategy, did lots of listening sessions, had lots of conversations, and created what is pretty much what the model that NTIA uses to talk to people about having a workforce strategy. So we have the Strengthening Ohio's Broadband and 5G Workforce Strategy. We have 11 programs currently for everything from fiber splice technicians to tower climbers to 5G installers to really make sure that we have a pipeline of talent that we can create throughout the state of Ohio to make sure that we have the workforce necessary to build the infrastructure of the future, right? So we're continuing to expand that program. We have an industry sector partnership. That industry sector partnership, most of the people around the table are a part of, making sure that we're actually creating the programs that will be beneficial. And I can say currently, one of the big things that we're looking at, the two big things that are to come, are trying to make sure that we have enough pole replacement technicians, so people who can actually go out and look at poles and make sure that they know what's on the pole so that we can replace those poles when necessary. And the other one is fiber locators and just utility locators, because the other thing that we're running into is that as we move around the state and we're doing a lot of buried fiber, having enough locators to be able to find, gas lines and water lines and things like that is becoming more and more important, so that we don't accidentally hit a gas line or a water line as we are putting in fiber. summer, right? So we're really we as a state are very aggressive in trying to work with the industry. And again, I want to be clear: this is a partnership. So it is an industry sector partnership. We are trying to make sure that we are not just going out and saying this is what we as a state thinks is good for the state, but we're really trying to sit down and say, like, what are the industry recognized credentials? What do the programs look like? What do you need from us? So that we can create those programs so that we're ready to really implement the ORBEG rounds and the BEAD rounds and everything else that's coming to make sure that we have the tools in Ohio to build that network of the future. Actually, the biggest concern I have is that we'll do a really good job of training all these people, and then when the BEAD program happens, that people will steal all of our employees and go to other states. That's my biggest fear, is that we'll just be the training ground because of how valuable these talented people are going to become as they pop out of our programs.
Yeah. To the providers around the table, I mean, do any of you wish to comment on, are you having staffing challenges? Are you where you need to be with workforce?
Well, I'll just comment, I do want to give Peter and the governor and the lieutenant governor such credit, because I think identifying the challenge first and foremost is a big piece of the equation, and then putting the resources of the state behind it to make sure, again, we are starting. It's not just, when you post a job online, but how do you work upstream, up the pipeline to get kids aware of these jobs, to get adults aware of these jobs and get the necessary credentials so then that they are a qualified candidate that you can hire. I just do want to call out too that, AT&T was fortunate to be part of an opportunity at the Dayton Correctional Facility of a pilot program. So folks who are re-entering after incarceration were trained to be tower technicians. And again, I think the creativity that goes into thinking about all of the folks that are out there that can be part of this workforce opportunity is really thoughtful. So the administration has just done such a huge job.
Second chance opportunities.
Absolutely. And I'll just mention too, there's what we do through our own company, but I think, the partnerships with our community colleges, with our vocational schools, through the tech credentials, I think it's an all of the above approach that's needed to, again, get the workforce that we're going to need. So we've been working really closely with Tri-C Cuyahoga Community College up in the Cleveland area, again, to make sure that we've got the credentials needed that can get these folks, ready and able to be hired.
Great. Anybody else?
Yeah, so as Peter pointed out, the training of the future workforce is very important. But we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity here. With the amount of subsidy dollars flowing, not only into Ohio, but across the country, it will put a tremendous amount of stress on all of our business partners, because if you have a build in Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Ohio, Kentucky, those business partners have to figure out how to build for the customer, us, right? So one is an opportunity, but there will be stress in the system because there's so much money flowing. So it is an opportunity that has been highlighted, but there is some agita rolling, particularly when you roll in the BEAD, with all the money flowing. There will be some stress in the system.
Yeah, I think we all face some challenges. I think we've been aggressively building probably since 2010, and I think we've developed some strong relationships with colleges and local universities, particularly UC, the University of Cincinnati's cooperative education program, and so they've been a good pipeline of having the student work part-time, a quarter go back to school. I'm dating myself, semesters. I was on a quarter system many moons ago. And so having those relationships with the universities, our field, looking at it from a field technician perspective, recruiting job fairs. I think we've had success with the military and veterans job fairs, and developing those relationships with the local and trade community colleges. But I think, some of our best recruiters are our employees themselves, actually, in referrals, and that we offer incentives for that. And we've had a long history and legacy of folks, family members, mom, dad, grandpa, and that work for the company, because it's been a really great place to work. I'm a testament to it. I've been there 44 plus years now, and that's, I think, once we get them, and because of the environment and the culture and that we have, people like to stay. But I think going back to the techs, we have what we would call a state-of-the-art training facility. You wouldn't be able to tell it by looking at it from the outside because it's an old garage, But what we've done inside is tried to replicate any and all of the type of situations that our technicians might go into, and when they're going into a house to connect service up in an attic, in a crawl space or whatever. And I think we've found that we can have our employees that with no background or whatever, if they have a good strong work ethic, they're reliable and show up to work every day, that we'll be able to have them up and functioning very well within a 6-month time period. So we're pretty proud of the ability, that we have there. We, are working with the state of Ohio. We actually had Eric Leach come down and tour that facility.
Sure.
We've been collaborating here now recently with Miami University, Cincinnati State, and Sinclair about the cohort, or the trying to develop a program to create that pipeline also of students coming out. And we've got techs that are trainers that are actually participating as a part of that, the ones that teach our folks how to do it, to help make sure that the curriculum is, up to par, and making sure that they're learning the right things.
It's great to hear so many of you are engaging with the higher ed community throughout the state. They're building curriculums, they're an incubator for talent, and that's really important. When we talk about broadband deployment, we've talked about all the millions of dollars that are flowing through your companies to help expand infrastructure throughout the state. But I think what is lost on people outside the industry is that it's dependent on cooperation from pole owners, especially in rural areas. So we're talking about you have to replace outdated poles, or you have to construct new poles, or assorted other make-ready costs because you're adding more weight to the poles, and you have to, there are other wires already on the poles that you have to coexist with. I've heard from a provider not at this table, the average cost per pole can be anywhere around $3,500. And of course, there's tens of thousands of poles across the state. So the legislature did realize this in the most recent budget. They appropriated $50 million to create what's known as the Ohio Broadband Pole Replacement and Undergrounding Program, because, of course, poles and conduit sometimes flows underground. Is this money making a difference? Are there other physical hurdles to constructing new plant that you think the state needs to address? Whoever wants to take this one first.
Alta Fiber did not support the legislation when it came out. I think we viewed it as kind of a second bite at the apple for companies that underbid in various grant programs. Pole replacement, pole attachment, it's all part of, the construction that you need. And, they had opportunities to, and what I would say experience in this realm to be able to make sure that they took that into account. Now, the fact is it passed. So Alta Fiber is right now looking at the ability to utilize it where we can.
Sure.
The issue is that it's a reimbursement program, so you have to actually incur the cost in that. And then I think what's being highlighted, though, is that, the permitting and construction process to attach and or replace the pole is taking a long time. And I think, if we don't get that corrected or, help make it a more efficient process, a lot of the dollars that we think are going to come out and be utilized in the next 3 to 4 years, you're going to extend that to 5, 6, 7 if we can't get that problem fixed.
Yeah. Any other comments, Peter Voderberg?
Sure. I think so. We're very excited to get the pole replacement program and undergrounding program up and running. The applications are available now on our website. We have had a couple of people apply, and really, what's been happening to us recently is two things. One is we are working kind of the bugs out of the system because we have been working with the legislation, working with our industry sector partners, and talking through from an application perspective what are the things we need to be able to show that someone is complying with the requirements of the law when sometimes invoicing and the law don't match, right? Because again, I think the biggest issue we have is that many of the industry, when they get an invoice, it is for just the totality of what the make ready was, whereas we at Broadband Ohio from the legislature are trying to look at it as like a per pole or per mile undergrounding cost. So we can sometimes do the math. It doesn't always work out as perfectly as we wanted to. So we're working through strategies. It's really easy when it's polls because 12 polls, $12,000 was $1,000 a poll. That's simple. But when it's like I have 10 polls and then 5 mid-span polls and then 4 miles of undergrounding, and it was all just 30 grand, you kind of have to guess as to how you're going to accommodate that application. So we've been working those kinks out right now. But I can say, I think the big issue that we have been running into is this idea of it's not so much the cost. The cost is a barrier. So I don't want to underplay that. I'm not trying to say that that's not the issue, especially with we've run into situations where we don't have tall enough trees. So we've turned into much more expensive metal poles, aluminum poles, right? Poles that have to be much higher than we were thinking. Poles that we're replacing that are over 60 years old. So they really need to be replaced and they need to be much taller, right? But really what we've been finding out is that the bigger issue is the permitting issue itself, right? And so we run into circumstances where some of our grantees have had, permits that have been 18 months, right? So, and I think what we've been seeing, and Chuck, I think you actually talked about this a little bit a minute ago, is that, the system could accommodate expansion that it had been seeing for a long time, right? So our poll owners and folks like that were very much like, oh, well, we're just anticipating that you're going to expand X amount and we can kind of absorb that. Well, when we injected $250 million into the process, right, we saw poll applications skyrocket and our poll owners just can't do it fast enough. And some of them are creating quotas that are impossible to follow. Some of them are just sitting on permits. And it's not because they don't want to issue them. It's because they have so many requests that it's difficult for them to accommodate. So that is why we're really working with our poll owners as well to talk through what can we do to help you accommodate these massive amount of permits? Because again, with BEAD, it's going to get worse. It isn't going to get better. We're going to have hundreds of thousands of poll permits over the next few years that we have to make sure we can accommodate quickly, or like Ted said, right? It's going to go 5 years, 2030 is going to show up real fast, and we don't want to sit here and be like, well, we would have built it, but we couldn't get to the permits in time. So,
well, making broadband service both available and affordable those are tall enough orders. But then the question becomes, how do you convince people who've gotten by this long without having the internet to embrace service? Peter, you kind of alluded to this early on in the program, as did Molly. Can any of you comment? How should we be promoting digital literacy here in the state? Peter.
So I'm going to jump in to begin with because I'll talk about the state program. So part of the IIJA, the big federal legislation that created the BEAD program, and also another aspect called the DE, or the Digital Equity Program, we created a state digital opportunity plan. And one of the things that we realized very early on is that the state of Ohio, we can't do it ourselves, right? So we've always created partnerships through our broadband grants. And so we similarly were like, for digital literacy and digital opportunity, we want to do the same thing. So we split the state into 5 regions called Regional Digital Inclusion Alliances. And those RDIAs each have a lead agency that help really bring forward all of the needs of those communities. So instead of it being us at Broadband Ohio trying to go across the entire state and make decisions about how to help people have digital literacy skills or have what we frequently call digital navigators, but which will be changed name-wise very soon, in libraries and other public places to help people understand how to use the internet and use devices, we're working and trying to figure out what does each region need. So some regions really need devices, right? They have a lot of good library systems or other community anchor institutions that can teach people skills, but they don't have the devices. In Northwest Ohio, we had a fantastic grant program that we did using the digital equity dollars, the planning dollars, where entrepreneurs, right, who were running small businesses off their phones, were able to take a 6-week class, and then at the end of that class, they were able to get a computer so that they could actually run their small business using that computer, right? So it's transformational for those small business owners. We had one small business owner who went from being a one-person shop running their phone, right, to having multiple employees because they could actually run their business more efficiently using the computer and having internet access, right? So we know that the regions are going to know what to do best. So the way that we've been looking at it is to make sure that we're partnering with multiple different organizations all throughout the state using these Regional Digital Inclusion Alliance lead entities so that we can have these conversations about what each community needs and get them the resources that they deserve. So
the topic is digital literacy. Would any of the broadband providers like to comment on what you're doing as a respective company?
Yeah, so as I mentioned a little bit earlier, I think it's really important that there's no silver bullet for solving digital literacy. It's adoption, it's affordability, it's access. But what we have found is what is most valuable for the adoption piece is to try to meet people where they are. And like Peter mentioned, partner with trusted, partners in the community. So there's a lot of folks that have been doing work on this topic for years. And, they've built a clientele, they've built trust with it, because it is vulnerable to show up and say, I don't know how to turn on a computer. I don't know how to operate email. And so finding the people who've built that trust in their communities and have that relationship to walk them through these moments of vulnerability, I think is really important. Like I said, we have a partnership with the Boys and Girls Club in Columbus. We've got partnerships with Esperanza and Ashbury in Cleveland. We've worked with, different partners, whether it be the water district, whether it be city council members, whether it be, Metro Health, because I think the other important part is the use cases that this unlocks. When you say, instead of having to maybe take 4 buses to get to a doctor's appointment, by adopting and, having the connectivity, you can do a telemedicine appointment. You might get that answer you need on a healthcare question much more efficiently and effectively. Same thing, all the job applications that are available online. This can allow you to work from home with that connectivity that, again, maybe is a better quality of life for something that you're looking for. So, again, I think it's one thing for the providers to tell that story, because it does, sometimes come off a little bit of self-interest. Use our service. It's going to be great. Sure. So I think for us, it's really identifying the credible voices in the community and having them share and tell the story.
Chuck.
At Comcast, we understand that the value of being connected increases the opportunities for economic growth, better educational outcomes, higher employment rates. So to that end, we as a company have invested $1 billion across the country to reach tens of millions of people with our comprehensive digital equity program called Project Up. And we're using a network of digital navigators just to get people connected to the internet, because we know there are better outcomes. And we believe that we can help break down barriers to access. And Project Up has been an excellent program that is being recognized for all our work across the country.
That's great. Ted, Alton.
Yeah, I think we're doing similar to what Molly had said. We're collaborating with the nonprofits who already have a relationship with the folks. And we've been a very active participant in the Southwest Regional Digital Inclusion Alliance. We just had a seminar down in Cincinnati that Peter spoke to, and we had folks on the panel, as well as Fifth Third Bank was the other participant, to just share with the interested partners a number of the things that Alta Fiber, Fifth Third, and others in the community are trying to do to help increase the digital literacy. I think our Bell Foundation is also making monetary contributions to help fund these digital literacy programs in the community also.
Well, as we close today's program, I'd like to ask each of you to perhaps gaze into the crystal ball. And, we were reflecting earlier on how far the industry has come in just 2-3 decades. Talk a little bit about what sort of technologies and services are you perhaps experimenting with, and what do you see as the delivery system for broadband service 10, 20 years from now? I mean, is it going to be fiber to the home? Is it going to be fixed wireless? Will it be something like Elon Musk has with satellite-based Starlink service? Any of the providers, whatever you're willing to divulge, willing to share what's next?
Yeah, so I think it's going to be an all of the above approach. People have enjoyed the connectivity, whether they're on the road, at their home, and that's not going to change. I think what we have seen is what does change is the amount of demand that there is on the network. So you think about how when 2G started, maybe it's phone calls. 3G, you start to see, advanced text messages. 4G, 5G, each iteration of wireless technology has unlocked a new application use. And all of that wireless traffic then ultimately gets dropped onto the fiber backbone from our towers. But also, you think about the number of connected devices you have in your home. Again, it might have been one smartphone, and now it's a smartphone, an Apple Watch, an iPad. All of the devices rely, again, on that bandwidth and that connectivity. And we haven't even gotten to, again, AI. We are seeing a lot of
Great point.
opportunities and evolution, and that will be, a game changer, I think, for a lot. But again, it requires an immense amount of bandwidth. And so it's going to be an all of the above approach. I will say that for AT&T, we've reached 20 gigabit symmetric speeds in our labs. And so again, one of the things the pandemic highlighted is it's really important to be able to download, but for those telemedicine, teleconference, distance learning, you also need that upload speed to be equally robust to have a really great experience. And again, we're seeing with a lot of the evolution that you'll need that symmetrical speeds in order to unlock the innovation. So I think we'll see higher speeds, hopefully ubiquitously, but then also relying on things like low orbit satellites that can provide connectivity in those more rurally challenged, topographically challenged areas where it's a little more expensive to run a fiber connection through, hills and valleys and trees.
Chuck Duncan, what's next for the largest provider in the United States?
So we are currently updating and upgrading our network, our backbone. Our backbone is all fiber, but we are installing across the country new nodes that will either deliver up to the customer's choice, either fiber to the home or coax. And it will be the same quality and the same fidelity no matter what they choose. There will not be a degradation in what they see. And we recognize that the future's already kind of here. Like I like to point out, if anyone watched the Peacock, go NBCU, the Peacock playoff game.
Well played.
It was the most internet traffic ever, just for a football game. We see spikes on Thursdays because of Prime's Thursday night football games. So the future's here. We're building a network that can support it and sustain it. We know our network can. Because we are the number one and the best provider in the country.
Ted, what's Alta Fiber got going?
Well, we believe fiber 10 to 20 years will still be the superior delivery system. I think, we're making great levels of investment right now. And, whether it is wireless, whether it is, wired or even satellite at some point in time, it is going to hit fiber, to finally get to the end user. I think, as they've mentioned, AI, augmented, virtual reality, Internet of Things, I think, the need for speed and capacity are just going to continue to escalate. And we're going to, as a company, need to stay up to date with that. I think right now we are offering 2 gig symmetrical for our consumers and small businesses. We're planning higher speed launches later this year and next year. And we also provide enterprise fiber-based services, 10 gig up to 100 gig, but those are going to continue to grow and evolve also. So, we see a bright future ahead, for companies like us in the industry.
And Peter Voderberg, BroadbandOhio, we'll give you the last word.
All right. Well, I think, from our perspective, we very much have a fiber preference, especially right now. We want to make sure that people are getting the connectivity they need. Because, again, a couple of years ago, when we started, everybody was talking about 25.3 and that was, the standard. And we've already seen in just a few years that the standard has changed from 25.3 already down to 100 down and 20 up, right? And it's just going to keep happening, right? And one of the things that we didn't mention, quantum computing, which is coming, is going to take massive amounts of data. Like if we're gonna link it together, and from the state's perspective, right, we have an extremely robust and one of we would say one of the world's best networks through ORNet, right? So we have fantastic connectivity to our government buildings, our research institutions, our schools, and things like that. And again, our universities who are at the cutting edge of research, whether it be through drones, whether it be through flying cars, right, whether it be through quantum computing or anything like that, right, they're just going to continue to need those massive increases of bandwidth, right? Like I think ORNet right now can take a spike of 100 gigs, I think is what it is, and we've seen them happen, right? So like for many of the people around the table, you've seen that happen as part of that network. And so those demands are going to go up, right? So for right now, what we see is that yes, there's going to be a space for all technologies, right? We know that there's going to be some examples that you're going to need to have satellite to get to, or you're going to need to use fixed wireless because it's really difficult to justify running running fiber 10 miles down someone's road to then go up a 2-mile driveway for a single person who may not even take the internet, right? So we know that there's going to be a space for some of these technologies, but ultimately we really are prioritizing fiber to make sure that we can keep up with the demand that's going to continue to happen. And we're excited about all the technologies. We're excited about working with everybody. And like I said, our number one goal will always just be universal coverage. So however we can get there in the short term is what we're going to do.
Sounds like a great goal. Peter Voderberg, Molly Kocour Boyle, Chuck Duncan, and Ted Heckman, thank you for coming on our program today to share these updates. Thanks to all of you for your investments. It's clear that Ohio has made great strides in a short period of time, but we can't take our eyes off the challenges and the needs that remain here in the state. Well, that wraps up another insightful episode of Down to Business. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe for more captivating conversations with key players and influencers in Ohio's business scene. Don't forget to leave a review and share your thoughts. It helps us bring you the content you want to hear. Until next time, stay informed, stay inspired, and let's keep Ohio's business community thriving. I'm Rick Carfagna, and thanks for being with us on Down to Business.